Three, two, one.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Season 4 of the Let's Dig In podcast. I'm your host, Chef Rich Rosendale. And believe it or not, we are on episode number 47. Somehow, over the last couple of years, as busy as it's been, I've managed to find the time to have all these great conversations. And obviously, it's been a couple months since we've posted one because it's been very busy. We've opened up a restaurant. And before we get started with the show, I do want to mention some of our sponsors, our partners, because they really help us do what we do. And obviously, opening up the restaurant, we had two huge partners in opening up R3 Rosendale Concepts in Atlanta. The first of which happens to be our title sponsor for this season, and that is Wearing Commercial. They have been a huge supporter. Everything from equipment to supporting us with the marketing, and because the restaurant is fully electric, hoodless, so you can't just put any kind of equipment in there. They helped us out a lot with our induction and some of the sous vide equipment. They've been a great partner, so thank you, Wearing Commercial. We appreciate your support. And also, another big player in getting R3 launched was Ovention Ovens. They played a big role. They have the very powerful hoodless speed ovens. We put a few of those in there, and they are really kind of the backbone of what we're cooking with there. And also a longtime partner for us has been Mila. I use Mila in my home kitchen, and also Well Built. They've been a big partner with our cooking classes as well as the RC Culinary Lab. And they have lots of brands under their umbrella of products that they make. And also an ongoing partner. We use this everywhere from our cooking classes in our restaurants, and that is Dry Ager. Listen, if you're dry aging meat and fish and anything like that, you definitely want to check out their products. They make the best dry agers on the planet. And also Steelite. Steelite is our go-to for buffetware, serviceware, plates, utensils, you name it. They're a huge partner. And also they've helped us out with launching Rosendale Online at Home, which are a lot of my home recipes. And I love their collection. They really played a big role in helping select all of the plateware for the new kitchen renovations that I did back at my house. So anyway, without further ado, let's get started with episode number 47. Our first guest is going to be Ted Smith. Ted is a good friend of mine. He lives in Columbus, Ohio. Of course, I spent some time in Columbus. I have lots of friends back there. Met Teddy through another close friend, Rick Mailer, and I was invited to go quail hunting a few years ago. And yes, I do quail hunt now after I got a couple years under my belt. I'm more familiar with cooking quail as opposed to hunting it. But Ted and I have spent lots of time together, and we've had some great experiences. We're always partners on the hunt. And I just thought that the place that we visited was worth putting on an episode. It's a very special place. I don't want to steal all of Teddy's thunder, so I'll let him talk about it. And where at in Georgia that we go that is so special. So without further ado, let's dig in with Teddy Smith. All right, well, Ted, welcome to the show. This is the first podcast of 2023 for us, so you're able to kick things off. And I thought it'd be cool. We obviously, like over the last couple of years in doing the show, we've had a lot of industry people on, a lot of chefs and restaurateurs, and every now and then I like to bring people in that are from different sectors. And of course, also in my inner circle, you and I had met a couple years ago through a mutual friend who also was on the podcast before, our good friend, City Barbecue founder, Rick Mailer. And we have connected now on this annual quail hunting trip. And I just thought it was like such a cool experience, obviously meeting you and a lot of the other people that go to the trip, and also just the very special place that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But maybe just for our listeners, if you want to just give them a little bit of a background on who you are, we'll start there.
Thanks, Rich. I really appreciate the invitation. Great to join you this morning. So my name's Ted Smith. I'm a commercial real estate development attorney based in Columbus, Ohio. Early 50s, I've been hunting for about 26, 27 years. I did not grow up hunting. I grew up in a small community in Western Ohio called Bell Fountain. And back in the 70s and 80s, not a lot of hunting in Western Ohio back then. I did know people who hunted deer, but wasn't a big bird population, not in the flyways, so not a lot of waterfowl. My father was not a hunter, so I really didn't get introduced to it until the 90s when I was living in St. Louis and hanging out with one of my brother's good buddies from college who was a hunter. And so he introduced me, started taking me out to trap and ski clubs, teaching me how to shoot. And then we started to go to preserves in southern Illinois where I learned to hunt pheasant and quail.
The focus on where we're going to be talking about is kind of on more of our recent trip on quail hunting, which I have never done before until Rick invited me a couple years ago, which is where we met. And have you done quail hunting before? Was this the first time that you had gone whenever we went down to Georgia, or is this what types of bird have you hunted before?
I'd mostly hunted pheasant. I'd hunted a little bit of duck and goose over the years. I had hunted quail once or twice in southern Illinois, but for the most part, pheasant, we've got quite a bit of wild pheasant in southern Ohio, south of Columbus, in the Circleville area. I was able to hunt a number of times down there.
Well, I got to tell you, like whenever Rick first invited me to go to this, to be honest with you, I was a little bit terrified. I was like, I've done like target shooting before, and I've done some stuff like that, but I just was like, I feel so out of place, like going down with a gun in the woods hunting, and also I knew that you were going to be side by side with other people and a guide, and then the dogs all over the place. To be honest with you, I was kind of terrified about doing it. But I really feel like the place that we went to, Rio Piedra in Camilla, Georgia, is kind of what we're going to be talking a lot about, because it really was more about the actual, just the hunting itself, but the place is just so cool. And I really got to say that now, like each year, I kind of figured, I was like, the first year I'll probably just go, and then I probably won't go again, but I really look forward to it. And I think it's a lot about the experience there. But what was your first impression whenever you went down there to the hunt for the first time?
Sure. I have to admit, I was quite intimidated by it as well. When Rick had come back after
and you've hunted before.
I have, but they hunt quail a little differently down there.
Right.
And when you're talking about coveys of 20 plus birds, and you're shooting over dogs, those birds fly so low. And Rick talked a lot about how you've got to make sure you're not shooting low. You're worried about shooting the dogs, and a bird's a bird. They make those all day long. Last thing you want to do is injure somebody's dog or injure somebody else. So yeah, I was intimidated as well, but really excited. My first thought was just how different southern Georgia is than central Ohio.
Right.
There's not a ton of roll. Of course, we don't have much roll in northwest Ohio, but southern Ohio, we certainly do. The grass is different. The smells are different. It's just very, not desert-like, but just drier than I expected it to be. But I really found the atmosphere to be almost serene, especially at Rio Piedra. It's a beautiful facility. It's so far away from everything else. It's quiet. So I was really excited. I found the whole experience to be extremely relaxing.
Well, it's I kind of, whenever I would go back and see my family in southwestern Pennsylvania, southwestern PA, even growing up, hunting was huge. I mean, even like on deer season, first day of deer season was like a holiday. Kids were off. My brother-in-law is a big hunter. I remember around Thanksgiving, he's talking about, going out and, getting elk and all kinds of stuff and dragging things, bringing things back on. He also would take a horse out there, and they had to be aware of like bears at night and everything with whatever they were bringing back. And I kind of felt like, wow, we're like going to a resort. It's like, and I want to kind of like paint a picture for everybody, and feel free, Ted, to chime in and any other observations with it. But I didn't really know what to expect. And when you go there, each person, you got these really nice rooms. They have a menu each day of like what the offerings are going to be. And obviously if you don't have a gun, you can rent one, which is what I did. I do have guns, but I've never bought any for hunting before. And I think the coolest thing for me was like in the morning is whenever the Jeeps come rolling around and we get introduced to our guide. And you and I have been partners on the hunt. Everybody kind of pairs up. We go with like a decent sized group. And these Jeeps, and I'll have to post a picture in the podcast here to show everybody, but it's almost like you're out on this safari. It's like we're kind of sitting up on the back of this custom Jeep, and they're kind of driving you to all these different areas, it's pretty sprawling, as far as like the different areas that you hunt. And the morning dew, and just the being in Georgia, and the place, just the trees kind of have this really unique look because they're not really any branches kind of toward the bottom. And it's like the visuals, you can see everything when you're out in the woods. But to me, that was kind of like one of the big first impressions I had, is like seeing all those Jeeps come rolling around and getting ready to go out for the first morning, because we will have breakfast. Then we got on the morning hunt. We come back for lunch, and then we go back out. And again, I feel when I was explaining this to my brother-in-law, it was almost like, it was like two completely different sides of the spectrum. He's out there eating like pepperoni rolls, like, miles out in the middle of nowhere. But I love it. I mean, I just thought I look forward to it each year. Are there any things that from the trip that you kind of look forward to, or that you really kind of found tranquil or really cool during the visit there?
Well, what I look most forward to is just getting together with you guys, because we really don't get to. This the one time of the year we get together as a group and really get to talk and catch up and see what everybody's doing. But the way you describe the area is just spot on. I really like when we get back at the end of the day, as the night starts to settle in. You start to hear owls in the trees. Sometimes we get a little fog either in the evening or the morning, because we're right there, next to the river. And it's just gorgeous. I like to walk down to the river. And as you know, I keep looking out of that river thinking how much I'd like to wet a line and catch a shoal bass, but I haven't made that happen yet. But, it's all fun. The dinner's great. The time around the bonfire at the end of the evening is a lot of fun. So I really just look forward to the whole thing. Frankly, the hunting is probably the thing I look forward to the least.
Right. Well, and of course, Beth and Sam, who are the owners and run the property, they have tremendous hospitality down there, and the food is really delicious. I had forgotten, like, whenever we first got there, and obviously I'm a chef, so a lot of my sensory of like what I recall and what I see, a lot of it is related to food. So I enjoy kind of going down there, and I always bring some of the cookies back for the kids. They have these fresh baked cookies each day, but also some of those fried the peanuts are really delicious, and I used to kind of take some of those and just kind of eat those on the Jeep on the way out to the hunt. The one thing I'm also really into technology, and I know you and I had talked a little bit about this, but one of the things that was different this time was the integration of technology with our guide. And there was I really felt like it kind of like changed in a good way the overall experience. Did you want to talk about that with the dogs and the way that he was doing the tracking and everything?
Sure. And I think part of the picture that needs to be painted for the listener, the viewer, is the way we hunt is generally with 4 dogs. These specialized Jeeps that Rich is going to post a picture of have basically a kennel on the back, and there's more than 4 dogs. But it's although the day starts out fairly cool and you have to be layered up so you can kind of shed layers throughout the day, we'll end up at 75 plus degrees near the end of the day. So you have to change dogs quite a bit. But we generally hunt with 4 dogs, 2 pointers, and then 2 flushers. And the pointers are like machines. they don't even recognize that Rich and I exist. They run by us, they run through us, they run into us. We're just in the way.
Projectiles
Yeah,
a few times.
exactly. The flushers are typically little cocker spaniels, and they're the cutest things, and they're always at your feet. Um, but those pointers can get pretty far away from us, and so this year our guide had a GPS system hooked up to the collar, so he could tell when the dogs were on point. He generally knew which direction they were and how far they were away. Really great for you and me, Rich. I think it really helps the guide put us on the birds, which is why we're there. And so that's their job. They're really fulfilling their job. And it was really interesting. I was out hunting last weekend and got caught up in a conversation about collars with some of the guys. And they're a bit old school, and we're not out guiding individual people. And one of the gentlemen was lamenting the use of these GPS because he really thinks that when you're out hunting on your own, or you and your buddies, it takes a lot out of the actual sport of the hunt. I
Right.
never thought about it that way, frankly, because it just works well for us, and we got placed on a lot of birds. I think a lot
Well,
more than our colleagues did.
but is it true that they also, some of the more older school guides, don't they use bells and different things and stuff like that
They
to
they
tell?
do, and interestingly enough, so I have a black lab named Gage that I hunt over, and he was trained on a collar that makes noise, and so if I need to call him back, I push a button and it buzzes and he comes back, or I use a whistle. Well, Monica got me a set of bells to hunt with him. The first time I took him out, I put a bell on him. He couldn't hear my whistle, and he couldn't hear the collar. So he was out running out, kicking birds up 60 yards in front of me. So I don't know that I'm going to be hunting bell with him using bells in the future because he's just not used to it. But yeah, I think some of the old school guys still do use bells to track the dog.
Well, and I guess that with all these things that kind of maybe give you an edge or an advantage, or they help, like at what point is it now that it's like, oh, well, that's too much of an advantage? All I know is it made, like, for me, I enjoy walking out there, but I like to see birds and I like to have the experience. And I also got to say that it also added an element of safety, because I know there was one time whenever we were getting ready, we were kind of coming up on this area where the trees were a little high, and our guide said, he's like, "Hey, Rich, there's a dog on the other side there." And I obviously, I didn't want to shoot. In fact, you and I were really conservative with a lot of our shots, but it gave me a sense of like, okay, great. I'm glad I know that, because in a lot of cases, if you don't know and you are out there and you're a novice or what have you, you might take a shot and you don't see. So it really gave me, like, you kind of always knew where the dogs were, which I thought was really cool.
That is cool. It's a nice safety factor, but when you're in the business of paying hunters on birds, then you're going to take advantage of the technology.
Now, I don't, and feel free if there's some moments that you recall, but, and I hope I don't take this one away, but I don't know. I can't remember which one of us got shot one of the birds, but it kind of, bounce. Sometimes they bounce back, they get back up or whatever. And our guide was like Air Jordan. He literally jumps like I've never seen anything like it. He jumps up. It was like a wide receiver, like catching like just this projectile of this bird, and he caught it like right in his chest. And it looked like the Air Jordan shoe, where he had his legs kind of sprawl like he was getting ready to dunk. I mean, it was like, I could not believe it. Was like the coolest thing ever. Do you remember that?
I do. That's the first time I've ever seen anything like that happen. Had he not caught that bird, he was going to take it straight in the face. So
Oh yeah,
that's a pretty
totally.
good reaction.
Yeah. And the other thing is the dogs are definitely very cool. It is impressive, like how efficient they are. And also the discipline. I think that, if I recall, they were saying that some of those dogs will like stay on point for as much as like 30 minutes. Does that
Yeah.
sound right?
Yeah, I thought maybe even longer.
Yeah, which kind of really blew me away. So I wanted to also kind of just comment. and I wanted to also kind of ask you about, have you taken any back before, and have you cooked any game? Did you cook any of this quail? What's your experience with like just like game and cooking with it, or even eating it at different places?
I in terms of going out to eat, if there's game on the menu, I will generally try it. Trust somebody else to prepare it in a way that I'll like. I don't have a ton of experience. I have done quite a bit of pheasant on the smoker. I've done goose on the
Oh,
smoker,
wow. Okay.
and tried some things like that over the years. I have not yet cooked up any of the quail. I'm anxious to get some advice from you as to different ways to cook it. Although I did find a quail fricassee recipe on the internet that I'm interested in trying.
Well, now this year, I think our theme was discipline. And what I mean by that is we only took shots that we were like 90% sure that we were gonna get the bird. And if I recall, I mean, when we were kind of settling up with our bill and everything, we go there with a group of, several sets of guys, teams that are kind of, everybody's going out. You and I paired up again this year, which was great. But we really came out of the gate strong. We kind of look at it as we weren't the team that was like putting a bunch of lead up into the air. We took the least amount of shots and walked away with the most birds. Am I accurate by saying that?
You're going to get us in a lot of trouble for bringing this up.
Yeah.
For the viewer, we do hunt in pairs, and we generally you hunt both days in the same pair. And each year, you generally hunt in the same pair. We have one pair who shall remain nameless, but love to come back and brag about all of their stats, that they're keeping one stat. One guy's claiming one stat, and somebody's shooting better than the other one, and somebody had a something stupid 80-yard shot or whatever, they come back
Right.
and make up. So we heard a little bit about that on Friday. So I decided on Saturday that Rich and I'd start keeping some stats that may or may not have been padded slightly.
Right.
But we came back and had our own fun with the stats to give everybody a little trouble. But yeah,
Yeah.
generally though, I think we did do pretty well. I do think, and it might be attributed to the technology, we were fortunate enough to see a lot more birds than I think everybody else was. But what the viewer has to understand is, you can walk in and kick up 60 quail at once, and you might get off one shot, maybe two, but you're not
Right.
reloading and shooting again, because by the time you've unloaded your gun, they're gone.
Yeah.
That's not the way you want to hunt quail. You want to kick up two, three, four at a time, give yourself a chance to reload, and then have the opportunity to harvest additional birds.
And in fact, sometimes whenever when a lot of them would all fly up in one shot there, it's almost kind of hard to pick one, because you're like, oh, and they're all kind of like zipping by you and everything. But I mean, I think you and I definitely, and maybe that is kind of part of the safety component of it. And maybe, obviously you don't have, we're not like hunting like every other week. So, I mean, I want to make sure it's like, hey, if I think it's a little too low, because obviously with the dogs, like that's the big thing with me, is I just don't take a shot. So there's probably quite a few that we probably could have taken. Now, there was the one when I kind of refer to it as like, it was like the OK Corral, and we just hit this massive like covey after covey, and they were all over the place, and we could have had a Gatling gun. I mean, it was like I'm sure Rick and those guys probably heard us in the woods, like, what the hell's going on over there? It was like, tish, tish, tish. And it just like, as you mentioned, we just saw so many birds. I mean, it was just like, really, it was just, sometimes you run in, you hit a good area. And like I said, we had a great guide, but that was almost comical.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the guide said 40 to 60 birds, and I think I hit one.
Right.
Maybe. So, but it is a lot of fun to get down there and to see Georgia. And you and I had a chance to talk with the guide quite a bit about what we were seeing that was different. What I think it was the longleaf pine that we were asking about, that were so beautiful and that were
Yes.
growing back. I think they've been fairly heavily eradicated at one point in time. I had never seen cotton plants until we started to go down to Georgia. I'd never seen a
Yeah.
peanut plant. Um, so it is a lot of fun to get to a different area of the country that you've never spent any time to explore, to get to know the people, to hear their traditions and to eat their food. The food at Rio Piedra is always top notch. It is, as we all talked about this year, it would be fun to see them take maybe a little more of a southern bent and allow us to enjoy maybe some of what they're used to eating on a regular basis that I'm not going to get here in Columbus, Ohio. But it is just, yeah, it's just good food, good drink, and good friends, and a lot of fun hunting.
And you mentioned too, and I really feel like this is so true when I travel different places. Like if I'm going to Charleston or if I'm going to Italy, going to Georgia, really a lot of times, I think people always, and I'm not suggesting with this place, but I mean, I think this is really just saying that in general, when you travel, a lot of times people want to have that traditional fare. They want to, like, if you're going down to Georgia, you're looking forward to eating some traditional Southern fare, things that, grits and biscuits and things that are, what maybe you don't really eat every single day because they're just not on menus in restaurants and where you live. And I really, I was going to even kind of just talk a little bit about the quail. I actually just prepared some for a party we did on Saturday. It was our first party. It was a small group for like 20 people. And I did serve the quail. I think I sent you guys a text of it, but I was using it as a soup garnish. And I made this winter squash veloute, a real silky smooth squash kind of bisque. It was infused with like coconut and a little bit of curry. I had this apple turmeric foam. I had some Brussels sprout leaves on there. We kind of plated it up in the bowl, and then we poured it tableside, this nice silky soup. But I also put in there some slices of the quail that I smoked over some hickory in a drum smoker, and it came out. The smoke on it just came out absolutely terrific. I seasoned it just real simple: salt, pepper, a little bit of garlic, granulated garlic, and it had a beautiful smoke on it. But it was funny because when I went and told them, because I came out and explained each course, I said, hey, this is actually quail that Ted and I hunted down in Georgia. And at first they kind of looked at me. They were like, hey, there's not going to be any buckshot or anything. I was like, no, I'm sure that these are, I picked, 20 of the headshots of all the ones, because the ones I knew for the dinner, I wanted to aim for the head to make sure that there wasn't going to be any damage to the meat or anything like that. Hence the name, the quail sniper, that I've adapted over the last couple of years. But yeah, the quail came out great, and it was cool to be able to, as I travel, to kind of use the experiences, the different places that I go, and bring some of that back to a dinner and to talk about it. It's an opportunity. So I think that's also the ripple effect of going out and doing things like this. Whereas maybe somebody like me, I don't consider myself a hunter. But I came down, you meet a lot of different people, you network, you get to experience this really cool place. And that story, I think, in food, when you bring that back and you prepare that, and you can kind of bring the story along with it, it just makes it so much more special,
Yeah. Now, when you say you serve the quail as a garnish, did you take the quail off the rib cage and then just drop it right in the soup, or was it on
good?
on the
Yes,
plate?
good. So, obviously, like if you're gonna, sometimes I've cooked it at home. I've done some hunter style, which is like with chasseur sauce with like mushrooms and a thick kind of like gravy, white wine, shallots, tomatoes, and serve, and would kind of serve it almost kind of like it was almost like with a braise. I've done it that way for the kids. I've also done it like fried chicken, Nashville style. That's always very popular. But for this dinner, because it was like several courses, I smoked it at home. And then, cause I had a small smoker, I didn't want to use our big commercial smoker for, 20 little birds. So I used a small drum smoker to get like an intense smoke on it. And then I let it cool down. And then I took it off the carcass and then I vacuum packed it. And I just warmed it a little bit at the party in the vacuum bag because I didn't want to overcook it. And then we sliced the breast. And because it was sliced very thin, I didn't want to get it, hired to do this dinner and then somebody chips a tooth. So I had to make sure that, the slices were thin and I could see that there was no, cause you'll get, shots in there. But again, because I used our quail, they were, none of the meat was really damaged. It was really in great shape. But I did do some thin slices and I just put that around the bowl. And if you think of it having a soup and you have like little morsels of like smoked bacon, I almost kind of think of the quail had this like kind of nice little smokiness that it kind of added to the soup. So it was completely boneless. All the slices kind of fit on a soup spoon, which is like a good rule of thumb for soup garnish. But again, it was just this story. I mean, I put on there Georgia quail and I kind of told them about it. And it was, I put a little bit of roasted banana in the squash soup itself to give it a little bit of sweetness. And it was just really kind of a cool experience.
So as you know, I dabble a little bit in the kitchen, and one of the reasons I listen so much to your podcast, I'm always trying to pick up something new. In some of the reading I've done about smoking poultry, they always talk about trying to use a lighter wood like an apple,
Yes.
or cherry or some of the fruit wood. Why did you choose to do quail with hickory?
Well, I wanted to get first of all, I used some Virginia shag hickory. And so I'm trying to I also have some grapevines from Fabioli Winery, just one of our wineries right behind Roots. So I try to use as much local stuff as I can. Even the squash were white pumpkins and other squash that I went out and picked with my kids. So I try to use as much local stuff as I can. But it's also like whenever you're smoking with a more intense wood, like mesquite, mesquite's better for grilling because it's so intense. You can use a little bit of hickory, but you're really only talking about getting a real intense pop of smoke and not exposing it too long. Because if you were to smoke it for an extended period of time, but the quail, they're so small, they really don't take very long to cook. So a little bit of time goes a long way. Have you been to the Greenbrier before, Ted?
I've not, no.
So when the Greenbrier and a lot of these different resorts have they have hunting and gun clubs and all this stuff. And some of the funny things is, I remember whenever I was going through the apprenticeship program there as an apprentice chef, sometimes you would just get thrown into stuff. Everybody thinks that, it's not like a classroom where they teach you to cook this, and that. You're kind of learning on the job, which is why the apprenticeship was really pretty cool. But I remember, I think I was like a junior apprentice, and they sent me out for a lunch party out to the gun club with all these hunters. And I didn't know what I was going to cook until they brought it back. And they brought back like chuckers and pheasant. And I was just back there, like, they're helping me clean it. The guides were there helping me clean it. And then I did it like chasseur style. So I had mushrooms and red wine and all this stuff and everything. But it was kind of like cyclical where, I remember doing that as an apprentice. And then here I am now actually kind of going out on a hunt and seeing it from that perspective. But I will say that it has definitely given me more respect for the process of hunting. And my philosophy is, even just with food in general, is I always really try to tell my kids, like, especially with meat, I hate to see like meat, proteins like that going to waste, because people don't realize the care and energy that it takes to raise like a cattle or, pigs, all this stuff. Vegetables, on the other hand, you can recycle that back into the earth and, it kind of adds the nutrients back in. But I kind of have a different paradigm as it relates to game and meats and things like that, just because of, when you actually go out and you hunt something, you have a completely different perspective. And even being a chef, going out on the quail hunt, I mean, and just seeing, the birds, it's very intimate. It's a very different experience than just ordering something from Instacart and it shows up on your doorstep.
You have a bit of an advantage in your training, in your facilities. It's a little easier for you to utilize everything. But I think, in my experience, most people who are serious hunters find a way to use what they kill, what they harvest, and there's not a lot of waste. Whether it's finding a relationship with a local meat processor who can take your ducks and geese and grind them into sausages and bolognas and things like that maybe the family finds a little more appetizing. Goose, which we shoot a lot of geese here in Ohio. Goose can be kind of difficult to cook. It can be really, really heavy. But it is. I think it's very important for hunters to understand how to use every aspect of the animal that they can. It's exciting to see that more and more people are hunting. As I said earlier, not something I grew up with, but I did grow up with a family with a significant portion of my family is involved in agriculture. I grew up with parents who would split a steer with other members of the family. I grew up eating tongue and heart and liver.
Wow.
And I think it's very important for people to have exposure to that and understand how important it is to eat those things. I guess I didn't realize how important it is to eat those cuts of meat until I recently finished Bill Schindler's book, Eat Like a Human, which fantastic book, something I was introduced to by you through your podcast.
Yeah. He's fantastic.
He really is, and also an Ohio State wrestler, which I didn't realize until.
Oh wow! Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So a nice, somewhat local connection there. But it was very interesting to hear his perspective on nose to tail eating of an animal. Again, not something the average person's going to be able to do. The average person's going to have to rely on a local butcher, whether it's at the local grocery store or more of a specialty butcher. But it is something I think people ought to think about getting a little more into, is the nose to tail eating.
Well, and I think that my perspective as well, I may not be looking at it quite from that perspective, but the principle remains the same. And that's like trying to use everything. So even, for example, these quail, I actually took the legs and the bottom part of the leg, the little drum, I roasted those in the oven. The carcasses, after I took the breast off, I took the carcasses and I threw those into the stock because I was making some stock that I was going to use to thin out the soup a little bit, and it had a little bit of a smokiness. But then I took the legs and I actually put almost like a really fine sausage almost. I kind of put that inside the legs and I rolled those up, poached them off, roasted them a little bit. And they look like little kind of ballantines, like little sausages, little coins. But there's a classical French preparation, pheasant salmi, and salmi can be applied to anything, but basically you'll roast off the squab or the pheasant, whatever the game bird is, and you'll take the breast off the carcass, and then you take that carcass and you steep that into the sauce and you simmer it. But I guess where I'm getting at is I'm trying to extract flavor and utilize everything. And I tell our chefs, whenever there's product coming through the door, you've paid for everything. So try to extract like every little ounce of flavor. So you're not always going to get a return on it from a monetary standpoint. You might not be actually be able to sell it, but you can get every ounce of flavor, extracting gelatin out of things for viscosity of sauces. So it's really kind of just looking at that, trying to utilize everything. So it is the same principle. It's just I'm doing it at a different stage from the cooking standpoint. And I'm like, oh, I got these birds. I want to use them all. Yeah. But yeah, they really had great flavor. I mean, and I feel like the smoking really kind of lends itself. It kind of is a nice accent to the quail. I think the quail, they take on whatever kind of flavors that you expose them to.
Yeah, looking at what we brought home, the meat is very light in color. It's doesn't seem to have, although I'm sure statistically the vast majority of the blood at any given time is in the breast of that bird. It sure doesn't look like a lot of blood. It's not like, again, like a goose or something like that, wild turkey maybe. But yeah, it's exciting stuff. I've kind of experienced in terms of my own cooking that when you tell people that you're cooking wild game that you've shot, um, maybe on the home front, people aren't as excited about trying to eat it
Right. Yeah.
as they would in a restaurant. I was out at Rick's a week or so ago, and I'd taken bacon wrapped smoked pheasant breasts that I just recently shot. And it may have been a chucker or two thrown in there, and Rick, being Rick, didn't hesitate to jump in and give it a try. I think he may have been the only one, maybe one other person jumped in and tried the pheasant, but it certainly wasn't the most popular.
Well, I'll tell you,
dish.
when again, when I was even working at the Greenbrier back in the day, the butchers, I know they every year they'd be making jerky, deer jerky, and I looked forward to it. I mean, Larry had a bag of in the butcher shop, and it was like, people, it was like sought after. People loved it. It was so good. The other thing is, I rent my gun whenever I go there, and I didn't, this is another thing I didn't realize until spending more time in this kind of whole ecosystem, is that a lot of people really, they take the guns really serious as well. You can spend a lot of money on a lot of these different shotguns, and you had brought one that was different this time. What kind do you use, and what was different about the one that you had brought? I feel like maybe you said you bought it for your son, and then you brought it.
Yeah, so well, at Rio Piedra, we're obligated or required to use an over under or side by side. Just has to be a break action shotgun, and that's, as you know, it's just a safety issue. And we generally walk around
Now,
with
is
the
that
gun.
just because Ted, that it's just those are just two shells in it,
Well,
or
it's
is it
the
because you can
safety
break it?
issues. Yeah, the safety issue is more because it's broken most of the
Okay.
time. They
Yes.
prefer you to walk around. As you recall, we'd hunted for quite some time with Billy, our guide, before he finally said, "Hey, look, guys, I've observed you. I trust you. You don't need to walk around with it broken all the time." Which is, I think says a lot about our conscientiousness from a safety perspective. But a lot of those are break action, typically over under. Um, there are a lot of guns out there, and you can go all over the place in expense. So the gun I brought this time is a Mossberg um, over under. My son had asked for a gun for his birthday. He got back into hunting about a year ago with me. And so it's a very modern Turkish made shotgun, screw chokes, a lightweight 20 gauge. We're all hunting 20 gauge down there. That's something else people probably ought to know. We were hunting 20s and 28 gauge guns. Um, but it was just a well-made, lightweight, and not a particularly expensive gun. And I know there are people who go out and spend thousands and thousands and thousands on the gun, but it's not the gun that shoots the bird. It's the
Right.
hunter. And so I thought the gun worked great. Um, but there's the vast majority of people hunting in America are not hunting, at least anecdotally by my observation, are not hunting over unders. There's a lot of auto loaders out there, a lot of pump action shotguns out there, very reliable, very economical, and those people shoot just as well as anybody else.
Right. Well, definitely, it's a very cool experience, and like I said, I just thought that. I mean, obviously, I did some social media posts on this, but I thought it would be kind of cool for you and I to kind of do a little bit of a recap. I'm sure the guys will want to watch this just to kind of see if they can get some insight as to what was our secret this year. But but it was great. I really look forward to the trip, and it's really been terrific spending time with everyone. They do an amazing job at Rio, and the hospitality. That's the one thing. Even if you go somewhere even if there are aspects that are off, maybe, you go to a restaurant and the food isn't perfect, or somebody messes up your reservation, the hospitality can recover and go a long, long way. And everybody's so nice when we go there, and they really just do an extraordinary job. And like I said, for me, just the quail hunting was kind of a new experience, but I'm getting a lot of people texting me now. Like, I guess I'm like in the hunter circle with a lot of my friends. They just assume that I'm out there also hunting big game. And, I went back to Pennsylvania, and one of my friends I grew up with had, all his, like all the, what is it? All the different things
mounts,
that
the
heads. Yeah.
the mounts. Yeah.
And I was like, man, I don't really, I was like, would I put little quail heads or something up there? I was like, but I was kind of telling him like how many we got and how cool the experience was. But I was like, that's kind of about the extent of it for me for hunting. But I have a lot of respect for people that have done it for years, and it certainly has piqued my interest. But from a culinary standpoint, we've been cooking and using up all the product, and it's really been a very cool experience, and I've learned a lot. And it's been great developing all these relationships with everyone on the trip.
Well, one of the things I like about Rio is what we found this year is that the same people tend to be there at the same weekend every year. So there were a lot of familiar faces this year, which it was fun to sort of catch up with people that we met last year, to see what they'd done over the last year. And it's also a nice generational spread.
Yes.
You have parents there hunting with their teenage kids, and then there were people there well into their 70s and 80s. And it was kind of fun to see that older generation go out and hunt together, the spouses, and not necessarily everybody hunting, some just along for the walk and the observation, and, watching the dogs work and just enjoying being outdoors. There's a lot to see in southern Georgia. We keep hearing all the stories about these gopher tortoises that coexist in their holes with the rattlesnakes, and I'd love to see the tortoise. I have no interest in seeing the rattlesnake.
No.
That I can do without. But I'm very appreciative of Rick having done all of the research to find this place.
Yes.
And if anybody, ever asks about researching one of these places, one thing that I would note is that this particular facility is very highly rated when you do your research, and it's endorsed by some of the most reputable groups, retailers, and others out there. And I think that goes a long way to telling you what sort of experience you're going to have at a place like Rio.
Absolutely. Well, that's that we're coming up around 45 minutes or so here, and I enjoyed talking with you, Ted. And anything else that you want to add, or anything else you want to say that I overlooked?
No, I think you hit all the points. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you about what you do with the balance of the quail, and getting some ideas of what maybe I can try and do here on the home front in a more of a typical home kitchen. I'm sure we'll be in touch. I really appreciate the invite. This is it's been a real highlight for me to catch up with you on a podcast.
Yeah, you too, Ted. Thank you so much, and definitely look forward to seeing you again here soon. And obviously looking forward to the trip again. And have a great start to the new year. And thanks for being able to kick off our podcast for 2023.
Absolutely, Rich. Thank you. Take
care. Thanks, Ted.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Everybody, thanks so much for joining us for another episode of the Let's Dig In podcast. I want to thank Ted Smith for joining us and talking to us about our quail hunting. And I'm sure we'll have lots more stories next year. And check us out. If you haven't followed any of our episodes, you can go to richrosendale.com and click podcast. You can see all of our podcast episodes there. And also you can go to Rosendale Collective on YouTube, and you can see the video version of past episodes. And we've got lots of great content coming out for the rest of the season. I hope you will join us, and please like and share this episode. And we'll see you next time on the Let's Dig In podcast. Thanks so much.